It was a cartoon. Those weren't actually dwarfs in the movie. They were drawn, okay? So firstly...
They were drawn as dwarfs.
No, that is...
But it's a story about dwarves,
dwarfs.
Well, they shouldn't be called that. They should be called...
They shouldn't be called dwarves.
No, they should be called people with dwarfism.
They shouldn't be called...
What's wrong with being called dwarves?
Nothing, but that's not the correct
term. That's the story.
Dylan, apparently you're not allowed to call yourself
dwarves.
Apparently, Dylan, you're not allowed to call yourself dwarves, apparently.
I would love to hear, what should I call myself, sir?
All right, guys, so I want to talk about this pretty fascinating conversation on Piers Morgan about the reveal of the Snow White woke remake being done by Disney. Now, Snow White and the Seven Dwarves has been remixed by Disney to be Snow White and the Seven Magical Creatures, because apparently saying the word dwarfs is offensive. In fact, it is so offensive that they decided not to cast dwarfs to actually be dwarfs, okay, in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion, progressivism, right? They said, look, we're not giving dwarfs this acting role that, again, they otherwise would get, okay, because we don't want to be offensive, okay? We don't want to play into stereotypes. So, again, they decided to make the dwarfs everything but dwarfs, okay? They made them, in my opinion, I call them the seven crackheads, right? I actually think that they should just go ahead and, you know, hire Hunter Biden, okay, to be one of these dwarfs, okay, since they're about diversity and inclusion, and just name the movie Blow White, right? I mean, that's probably a better idea, because at this point, this movie is not Snow White anymore. It's Snow Brown, right? It's Snow Brown and the Seven Crackheads. So, with that being said, I want to react to this debate between a dwarf actor, Dylan Hornswoggle Postl, and comedian / LGBTQ activist James Barr, because you have two groups of people who claim to be marginalized and oppressed. They're going at each other, right? And I always find it to be fascinating when victimhood classes clash, right? Because, again, progressives are supposed to be for all so-called minorities until their interests are competing. And that's when you get fireworks, okay? Just ask Justin Trudeau, who is currently experiencing backlash from Muslims for basically supporting LGBTQ pride books in school, right? It's always fascinating when you see these so-called minorities going at each other, because, again, all minorities are not the same. They don't have the same interests. So, again, they're debating this, okay? And I want to react to it because it's a pretty fascinating conversation. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
The irony is that they profess, these progressives, to want to do this to protect you, right? They protect dwarf actors from being, you know, somehow smeared. But you don't feel that way at all.
Peter Dinklage spoke up about this, and that was my issue. He had in the past no issue cashing checks that were made for dwarf roles like Elf and all of that. Yes, he blew away the barriers when he did his roles that weren't necessarily made for a dwarf. But the Elf role was made for a dwarf. That check cleared just fine. So now that he's gone and done that, the progression of dwarf actors, it just doesn't sit right with me.
No,
that this guy who is exactly what you said, what gave him the voice for all of our community?
Yeah,
why?
I was honest. I think
a complete hypocrite. Let me bring James back in. So,
when
James,
Piers Morgan is agreeing with you, I think you need to be concerned. I'll say that for the.
So you're telling the dwarf actor what he should feel.
Having
literally just lectured me about speaking for someone in the dwarf community, Warwick Davis, you now accuse a dwarf actor.
No, it's not what I said. I said that if you're siding with anyone, you've got to worry. Right. What I'd like to say actually is that I kind of mostly agree with what you're saying.
And now Sir, that's just taking a pot shot there.
No,
it
is absolutely taking a pot shot. But I do agree with what you're saying. I completely agree with your point of view, and I think that's really important. But I can only speak from my experience, and as a gay man, I know that growing up, I witnessed gay people being villains in movies when I was...
Seven Dwarves aren't villains.
And that I think stereotypes are really important to
What stereotype do you think
and
they
actually,
represent?
In the universe of Snow White, wouldn't it be better if dwarves
I don't feel this is...
Yeah. So again, you can already see this conversation is a little awkward, okay? Because this guy, who happens to be gay, is telling this guy, who is a dwarf, okay, who happens to have dwarfism, telling him that, hey, if you agree with Piers Morgan, then there's a problem, right? While at the same time, if you heard this guy, he said, well, I mostly agree with what you're saying. He mostly agrees with what Dylan Hornswoggle is saying here. Again, I'm trying to figure out how that works, because by definition, then this gay guy would be agreeing mostly with Piers Morgan, because Piers Morgan definitely agrees with Hornswoggle, and Hornswoggle agrees with Piers Morgan. So again, I'm not sure exactly what he means by that, okay? And it doesn't really make sense. But let's hear this man's argument, right, for why Dylan should feel okay with being replaced by people who don't have dwarfism, right, in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
This isn't a part of this about the stereotype.
Right.
This is about roles that were made for people of my stature that don't have the chance to go out for other roles normally.
But you, James
So
Barr,
why are we
you want to
taking-
stop Dylan
I am
getting
not,
a role in a Hollywood film.
I am not going to get into an attack on a dwarf.
You don't want a dwarf actor to
No, I
land
do.
a role
I do,
playing
actually.
a dwarf part.
Listen, a
Why?
dwarf can play a dwarf part, but I think it's important to change narratives that don't fit in today's society. And really, it
Which
might
is
be
that
better.
narrative?
It might be better
What's the-
if dwarves
sir-
just exist
sir,
in
pardon
normal
me.
roles everywhere,
What's-
because they do exist.
What was
in
so
real
bad
life.
about the way dwarves were depicted in Snow White? Have I missed something?
Well, listen, I'm not here to talk about.
That's what I'm kind of wondering as well.
I don't
Tell us.
represent Disney, but I'm just saying I think I see their point of view.
What's their point of view? What was so bad about the depiction of the dwarves?
Why are you
What's the
so
point of view?
upset about a movie changing with the times and moving forward?
Because
to
I think that-
2020?
Yeah, but why, right? Why can't you explain what is the stereotype that is being played up upon here, okay, that is so harmful, right? First and foremost, this idea that all stereotypes are harmful is ridiculous, okay? Stereotypes exist for a reason, right? Stereotypes saves people's lives on a day-to-day basis, okay? Now, again, I think we should be careful about taking stereotypes to the extreme, but you know, I don't really have that much of a problem with stereotyping, especially if the stereotype obviously is true, right? And again, in some cases, stereotyping can save lives, okay? But with that being said, it's not a stereotype to have a dwarf play a role that is for a dwarf, right? Again, if you have a story and the story has a dwarf in the story, how is it a stereotype to allow a dwarf to play a role of a dwarf? I don't understand. I really don't understand that argument. Okay, dwarfs are dwarfs, right? Are you? It's the stereotype that dwarfs are short, or you know they look a certain way, or they look funny. Is that what the issue is? Right? I'm not sure exactly what this guy is getting at, but in my opinion, we don't have a world where we have dwarfs playing non-dwarf roles. We just don't have that. Okay, and in order to have that, you would have to use a bunch of CGI. It would cost a whole bunch of extra money, and it's just a lot to ask for. I mean, it's ridiculous. In general, we should be casting characters based off generally what they look like or what they're supposed to look like, right? Snow White should not be a Latino woman. Snow White should be white, right? The whiter the better, actually, okay, because it's in her name, okay? She's known for being pale white, as white as snow, okay? Just like she should be white, the dwarves should be all dwarves, and they should be actors who have dwarfism, because there's not a lot of roles in Hollywood where you have a dwarf anyways, and there's a lot of actors in Hollywood, okay, who again happen to have dwarfism that can't get these roles because there's not a lot of dwarf roles. So when you have one of these rare roles that actually opens up, why are you taking away opportunities for them in the name of wokeness, right? In the name of so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion? It's ridiculous. It doesn't make sense. And this is why wokeness is ass backwards. Wokeness is the opposite of common sense. These people are so concerned about not offending somebody that they literally are discriminating against dwarves, right? Because they don't want to hurt dwarves' feelings by casting dwarves or giving them opportunities to play roles that are fit for them, right? It makes no sense whatsoever, okay?
honestly, with great respect,
there is real news we could be discussing.
No, but this is real news if you're a dwarf actor who are now out of work because of virtue signaling idiots.
But you're just...
Yeah, so again, this guy's saying, well, there's real news we should be discussing. Okay, well, you knew the topic before you came on the show, right? So if it's not real news, why did you come on the show to discuss a topic that's not real news? But again, I'll say the exact same thing when there's a story about a gay person, right, allegedly being discriminated against for whatever reason. There's real news that we should cover, right? Like, you know, when the Supreme Court made a decision that, hey, you're not required as a business owner to be forced to do business with somebody that, you know, is in a same-sex relationship or whatever, if you don't agree with it, if it goes against your religious or moral values, right? There's real news that we should cover. Why should we talk about that, right? There's other things we need to talk about, okay? So next time there's a story about discrimination against gay folks, we should say, is there not other real news to talk about, right? That's not real news, okay? Because allegedly discrimination against dwarfs is not real news. Again, these people, I don't know if they hear themselves talk, okay? They're not as virtuous and moral as they make themselves out to be. They're really just about accumulating power for themselves, right? That's what it's really all about.
Saying that everything has to be rewritten
you want
to be inclusive,
as a cheap
when in
shot.
fact it's not inclusive at all.
No, you're using Dylan as a cheap shot to attack a wokie.
I don't think Dylan feels I'm using him as a cheap shot. And what I would say about the wokie thing is this. I have spent the last year listening to people tell me only gay actors should play gay parts.
Facts.
Only Welsh actors, so Michael Sheen,
Facts.
should play Welsh characters.
Facts.
And so on and so on and so on.
Conversation's a new one.
Exactly. Again, start replacing gay roles, okay, with straight actors and see how these people lose their minds, okay? They be like, why didn't you cast a gay person? Okay? Start replacing black roles with white folks, right? And see how these people lose their mind. They'll say, oh, no, that's not okay. You're not supposed to do that. But then, to me, wouldn't that not be the definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Taking a role that typically would be casted or given to a black person and giving it to a white person, that's giving a white person opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have, right? But apparently, it doesn't work that way. It only works that way when you have a role that's played by a white person being replaced by somebody that's black, right? Like The Little Mermaid. These same people who supported that and said that you're racist, if you have a problem with it, are the same people that are boohoo whining and crying, right? When they did not cast a person that was dark-skinned enough to play Lilo's sister in Disney's live-action version of Lilo and Stitch, right? They said, this person's not dark enough, okay? Lilo's sister is basically a black woman, they said, right? A black Hawaiian woman. Why you cast a light-skinned person for this? These people are hypocrites, bruh. It's all about power for themselves. Be damned everybody else, okay? If you're not sufficiently woke, screw you. We'll openly advocate to discriminate against you. And if you do the same thing to us, we're going to cry foul and say you're a bigot.
But the moment we have dwarf roles, which are the most famous dwarf roles in Hollywood history, then the only people apparently who can't play them are dwarf actors.
Weren't dwarf
and
roles.
I see there
It's a cartoon,
stinking
Piers.
woke hypocrisy.
It has not changed. It was a cartoon. Those weren't actually dwarfs in the movie. They were drawn, okay? So firstly...
it's a cartoon. It's a cartoon. Again, the same tired, stupid arguments that we know doesn't apply because, again, look at the reaction when Disney casted a light-skinned woman to play Lilo's sister in the live-action version of Lilo and Stitch. Like I just told you guys. Look at the outrage. That's a cartoon. This person was drawn as a dark-skinned woman. But again, right, these people got upset when, again, the real-life actor wasn't dark enough. Again, these hypocrisy is mind-blowing. It really is.
Drawn as dwarfs.
No, that is...
But it's a story about dwarves,
dwarfs.
Well, they shouldn't be called that. They should be called...
They shouldn't be called dwarves.
No, they should be called people with dwarfism.
They shouldn't be called...
What's wrong with being...
What's the difference between dwarf and people with dwarfism? This is ridiculous. It's the same thing. What's the difference between calling somebody a colored person and a person of color? There is no difference. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Yo, this guy has to be able to show for comedic entertainment, right? He is a comedian. Again, it's just, wow. My mind is blown just trying to understand these people's arguments, okay? It's comedic at this point. It's laughable.
Shouldn't be called dwarves.
Nothing, but that's not the correct
That's the
term.
story.
Dylan, apparently you're not allowed to call yourself
Dylan can call himself whatever.
Apparently, Dylan, you're not allowed to call yourself dwarves, apparently.
I would love to hear, what should I call myself, sir?
I think you should call yourself whatever you feel comfortable with, but as a person...
He calls himself a dwarf.
Well, that's great.
A dwarf.
Good
Yeah.
for you. I'm happy.
So now, sir, let me pause that. So it shouldn't be called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It should
Listen,
just be
I
called
do not want to
Snow
get
White.
cancelled
So are
because
you
I
saying-
think your point of view is more important than mine right now. But what I'm annoyed about is Piers trying to take a cheap shot at someone that believes in society moving forward.
Yeah, I'm actually
because really, if
I'm actually exposing the hypocrisy of the woke mentality of only gay people can play gay parts, only trans actors can play trans parts,
Facts.
and so on and so on and so on.
I think we want
right
to get
to the
to a
point,
place where
right to the
everyone
point.
can play
Snow
every
White and the
role.
Seven Dwarfs has to be cancelled because you're not allowed to have dwarf
You
actors.
should be happy, Piers, because it means that now you can play your dream role of Grumpy.
I would love to play Grumpy. I loved all the dwarves in that movie. They were great. Let me ask
now
you.
you're being a hypocrite. You'd love to play Grumpy, but you're taking a role away from a dwarf
The issue
actor.
at hand.
No, I would play a fully grown Grump quite happily.
By taking away a role from a
Let
dwarf.
me ask you, Dylan, about the Hugh Grant playing an Oompa Loompa, because again, it seems to me, we've got a clip of him playing an Oompa Loompa. Let's have a look at this. Now, they use CGI there, Dylan, to effectively make him into an Oompa Loompa dwarf.
So now-
what do you feel about that?
Yes, sir. So now.
Yeah, so again, I personally feel like they should have casted a dwarf, right? I mean, if you have a little person in a movie, unless, again, it's written into the plot, okay, that the person becomes a little person or whatever, right? I mean, I've seen that. But generally speaking, if you have, a little person in a movie, right, then it's probably should be an actual dwarf, right? A dwarf should be casted to play that role. That's just my opinion.
Now we're not only using CGI and spending extra money and funding for these movies when we could just cast dwarves in that role. Whether it be one dwarf or multiple, like they have been in the past. Now you're taking at least one role away or multiple roles away for Oompa Loompa characters. That's what they were in the past. And why, again, I go back to my stance on these roles in Hollywood in general are very hard for people of my community to get, besides the elf and the leprechaun and this and that. So why are they being taken from my community? That's my issue here.
Because progressivism is actually regressivism. Modern day progressivism is regressivism, okay? These people are so woke, okay, that, again, they just lack common sense, right? They're trying so hard not to offend people that they end up offending people, trying not to offend people, and it's ridiculous, okay? But what a lot of these people actually are concerned about is power and control, right? They want power and control. This guy wants to tell this guy how to think and act and feel, right? What he's supposed to be offended by, what he's supposed to call himself, what he's supposed to be okay with, right? Again, that's the problem here, okay? These people are hypocrites, but again, more so than anything, they want power and control.
You know why? You know why,
about the
Dylan?
stereotypes
You know why?
or
Because
anything.
people like James here, they think it's progressive and inclusive.
Nah,
when
see,
in fact it's regressive.
those are not my words,
it's
actually.
regressive
Piers?
and exclusive.
I don't- your words.
Pierce,
Dylan?
Pierce, I will agree with the mindset of it's not right. I don't know. James seems to be in partial agreement with me on the dwarf actors and the roles with that these should be. But I don't, on the other stuff, I can't speak on that. Obviously, I'm focused fully on the dwarf community really losing roles in these films.
Yeah, I think James started.
With
James
all the
started.
SAG strikes, with all the writer strikes.
Yeah.
And the actor strikes.
I do agree with
it's
you, and I
important.
think all I'm trying to say is that I think it's a nuanced conversation, and there's a few different points of view that are valid. And ultimately, in my experience as a gay man, the reason we're upset about gay people not getting gay roles in movies is because we're not getting straight roles as well. And until we are, it's unfair that those roles are taken away from us. So,
okay, so that's this guy's gripe, right? So how can you tell him that he should be okay with dwarves losing their roles, especially if dwarves aren't being casted to be in roles that aren't dwarves? And I don't think they should be. I mean, I don't think you should be casting dwarves to play roles that aren't dwarves. Okay, it doesn't make sense. That would be something I think is extremely hard to do, and it's just unnecessary. But again, when you do have a role of a little person, you need to make sure that you actually are hiring a little person to play that role. I think that makes sense. Just like if you have a role of a gay person, I think ideally you should hire somebody that's gay to play the role. Okay, or a trans person, or a black person, or a white person, or whatever. I think you should try to stick to the original story and the characters and try to cast it as accurately as possible. I think that is generally what the goal should be, right? But that's not what's happening anymore. Okay, what's happening is that they're putting wokeness ahead of the actual story, okay? Because a lot of these stories, they're rehashed. There's nothing new in Hollywood, right? There's nothing original in Hollywood anymore. They're telling the same old stories over and over again, and they're marketing it as new because it has a woke twist, right? And it's not working out for Disney. It's really not. And a lot of people are getting annoyed by it. And again, these people are exposing their hypocrisy.
In that respect,
What's that got to do with dwarf actors? Because they can't play regular sized parts.
I think Peter Dinklage's original point is that he would like to see more dwarves in films in general, not just playing dwarves.
In general, literally, a person of my stature should be able to go out for the same as a 6'5", 200-pound human. But it's just not that way, and I'm okay.
It's not that way, and it shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't be that way. Again, it's one of those things where it would be extremely hard to do. I ain't gonna say it's extremely hard to do. I mean, they can do it, but at the same time, it's like, why? Right? You're taking extra steps for what? Okay, you start to open up the can of worms when it comes to all of these casting roles that, again, just simply should be casted based off trying to stick to the original story, what they look like, and finding people who fit that bill as best as you can. That's what it should be about, right? Period. You don't have these conversations when you're sticking to that, right?
Okay with that. In reality, I'm okay with that. It's understandable to me. But when it's these roles that are made for people of my stature, that's where I have the issue.
You know what, Dylan? The movie, one of the great movies of all time, is called Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. If dwarf actors in Hollywood are not picked to play those roles, I don't know what roles you're supposed to be playing. It's unbelievable.
You're not going to get it.
I have
patronising. They've done this under the banner of so-called progression.
And it's not, again, like I said, these dwarves in that movie or in this story aren't viewed poorly, I don't believe. No. They're all separate characters that are actually heroes for this lady.
Yes.
And they take care and they take this lady in.
They save
her. They're
her.
viewed so well to society.
They saved the woman.
Now
they're hardworking, they're wealthy, they are kind, they are generous-hearted. It's hard to think of a more positive narrative about any people at all.
Well, let's just go back to the 1930s, Piers. I think you'd be happy
you know what, James?
Blackface would exist still.
No, it's not blackface.
James,
what are you talking about?
And what you're now doing, because you know you've lost the argument.
No, there's no argument.
And you know you've been embarrassed by the
argument.
You are
embarrassed. Hold on, guys.
We agree with each other.
Please.
All right. You know what? You do agree with him now because you realise the futility of your argument.
James, you can't go, oh, you got to go back to 1930s. No, James, if you agree with what I'm saying,
I agree with what you're saying. I don't agree with anything that Piers.
Yeah, here's the thing.
Which doesn't make sense because Piers agrees with him, right? And he agrees with Piers. So how can you not agree with Piers but agree with the dwarf? Because the reason why is because the gay man doesn't want to agree with the straight white male, and because the dwarf is a part of a victimhood class, he has to at least seem sympathetic to an argument that he knows he probably really doesn't agree with, except when it comes to his own, group of people, gay people, enacting, right? Again, this is just, wow, the mental gymnastics here blows my mind. I'm going to tell you, this boy, Piers got to stop inviting this guy on the show. And the reason why is because at this point, he's making arguments that are nonsensical, and he's not adding anything of value to the show. At some point, some of these woke people are so insane, they shouldn't even be on TV.
Dylan, just to be clear.
He literally just said what I said, James.
Dylan, just to be clear, he doesn't agree when I say it, but when you say it, he agrees.
Because you're not a dwarf.
That right now, I'm not a dwarf, no. But that right there is the hypocrisy of the woke brigade. Dylan,
okay. So let me
just say, Dylan, I've got to let you go, unfortunately.
Real quickly, please. Pierce, quickly.
Final word, Dylan.
Pierce, James, let me ask you this. So if a writer writes a piece on what I'm saying, is it wrong of them? Because essentially, that's the same as the words coming out of my mouth.
What? Yeah, but you're not saying that I am a woke hypocrite, and Piers is, and that's what I disagree with. Because I'm absolutely not. So when I'm saying that I'm not, nothing to do with your...
We're going to leave it there. Just to be clear, Dylan, he disagrees with what I say, but when you say exactly the same thing, he completely agrees with you.
You're so annoying.
Is James Barr right to a T. Dylan,
nonsense.
Fantastic having you on Piers Morgan Uncensored. You did such a brilliant job in highlighting why this is so ridiculous. Shame on Disney, and I hope you get another brilliant role very soon. I really do.
Well, I hope so too, and I hope that this really kind of resounds with how I feel.
Yeah.
And I don't speak for the whole dwarf culture and community, but this is literally
Piers
how
does.
I feel.
Piers Morgan speaks for the entire dwarf community.
I've got to leave it there, Dylan.
Yeah, this guy is salty because again, his hypocrisy got exposed here. Okay, straight white male says something, I disagree because he's a straight white male, right? Dwarf says something, I agree because he's a dwarf and I don't want to offend him. So therefore, I'm going to agree with it, okay? Even though, again, the straight white male said the same thing. It's ridiculous, man. These people are hypocrites. Again, in order to avoid this problem, you should just cast all roles as accurately as you can using real actors, okay? And that way you avoid these type of conversations. You don't even have this type of nonsense, right? And also, Disney will probably make money off their films if they did that. But hey, that's a radical idea in 2023. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.